The snap of a twig wasn't what woke me. It was the chilling realization of absolute silence. Not the gentle hum of the forest at dawn, nor the rustle of leaves in a morning breeze. Just a void, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own heart against my ribs. My eyes, gritty from a restless night, flew open, and I pushed myself up, my joints protesting. The air was cold biting, but it wasn't the temperature that sent a shiver down my spine. It was the space beside me, a space that mere hours ago had been occupied by my son, Silas. The tent flap was open, flapping gently, a cruel mockery of our shared adventure. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw its way up my throat. Where was he? Before we dive into this harrowing tale of betrayal and survival, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt utterly abandoned by someone you trusted? Share your stories in the comments below, and let's navigate this journey together. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more gripping true stories of family betrayal. I stumbled out of the tent, my breath misting in the pre-dawn gloom. The campfire, which we'd carefully banked the night before, was nothing but a scatter of cold ash and blackened sticks. No backpack, no sleeping bag, no trace of Silas. My gaze swept across the clearing, a desperate search for any sign, any flicker of movement. Nothing, just the towering, indifferent pines and the encroaching shadows. "Silas!" I roared, my voice raw with a fear I hadn't known since I was a child. The sound echoed, swallowed by the vastness, leaving me feeling even more insignificant, more alone. My mind raced, clutching at straws. Maybe he'd gone to fetch water. But he never went far without me, especially not in these woods. He knew the dangers. Then a flicker of white caught my eye near a massive ancient cedar. A note hastily scribbled was held down by a smooth river stone. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, the paper cold against my skin. Silas's handwriting, usually neat and precise, was jagged, almost frantic. My eyes scanned the words, and with each one, a new kind of cold seeped into my bones, a chill far worse than the morning air. It wasn't just that he was gone. It was why. The words swam before me, an accusation, a sentence. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer incomprehension. "Face Grizzly Beast," that's what it said. 2 words etched into my memory, with the searing brand of betrayal. Below it, a crude drawing of a snarling bear, its claws extended. A sick joke, a terrifying game. No, Silas wasn't like that. Not my Silas. My son, whom I had raised, cherished, taught to fish and track and respect the wilderness. The son who until now I had believed loved me unconditionally. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was an act of calculated, chilling abandonment. As the sun began to paint the tips of the eastern peaks with hues of blood orange, I stood there, rooted to the spot, the note still clutched in my hand. The forest, once a place of comfort and shared memories, now felt predatory, its shadows lengthening into grotesque shapes, its rustling sounds turning ominous. The chilling words, "Face Grizzly Beast," reverberated in the cavern of my skull, a macabre echo of his final damning instruction. My son, my own flesh and blood, had left me to die alone and vulnerable in the heart of this unforgiving wilderness. What could have driven him to such a monstrous act? It wasn't always like this. There was a time not so long ago when Silas looked at me with an admiration that warmed me from the inside out. My wife Willa and I had built a life around our son, a small, vibrant world in the quiet town of Oakhaven. I, Alaric, had always prided myself on providing for my family. My carpentry business, Alaric's artisanal woodwork, had been the backbone of our existence, a testament to hard work and dedication. Willa, with her gentle spirit and discerning eye for design, had helped me turn raw timber into pieces of art, nurturing both the business and our family with equal devotion. Silas, our only child, grew up amidst the scent of sawdust and the warmth of a loving home. From a young age, Silas showed an aptitude for building, for understanding the intricacies of wood. I saw myself in him, a flicker of the passion that had defined my own life. I spent countless hours teaching him, guiding his small hands as he fashioned his first birdhouse, later helping him design a sturdy bookshelf for his room. He'd listen wide-eyed to my stories of conquering difficult grains, of choosing the perfect timber. I thought we were building a legacy, a shared future. I poured my knowledge, my love, my very essence into him, believing I was preparing him for a life of purpose and skill. But then, subtly at first, a shift occurred. It began when his friend Yorick arrived in Oakhaven. Yorick was the son of a successful tech entrepreneur who had recently moved into one of the sprawling new estates on the outskirts of town. Yorick was charismatic, confident, and possessed a seemingly endless supply of the latest gadgets and expensive toys. Silas, who had always been content with our simple life, began to look at things differently. He started comparing. Our modest home, my calloused hands, the scent of wood that permeated our lives, they suddenly seemed insufficient, even embarrassing in the face of Yorick's shiny, effortless world. The comparisons grew into criticisms, whispered at first, then more openly. "Why can't we have a bigger house, Dad? Yorick's dad just bought him a drone for his birthday. Can I get one?" I tried to explain the value of hard work, the satisfaction of creating something with your own hands, the difference between wants and needs. But my words seemed to bounce off a newly erected wall between us. He started spending more time at Yorick's house, less time in my workshop. The laughter we once shared among the wood shavings faded, replaced by a growing quietness, a distance that began to ache in my heart. Willa noticed it too, her eyes clouding with worry. But even her gentle efforts to bridge the gap seemed futile against the tide of Silas's burgeoning resentment. The rift widened, almost imperceptibly at first, like a hairline crack in a beautifully crafted piece of furniture, threatening to split the whole thing apart. I saw the glint of envy in his eyes, the yearning for a life that was not ours, a life that felt far beyond my reach to provide. And with that envy came a slow creeping disdain for the life I had provided, for the man I was. I desperately tried to reconnect, to remind him of our shared joy, of the bond that once felt unbreakable. But Silas had begun to see me not as a father to admire, but as a barrier, an obstacle standing between him and the glittering world he now craved. The summer Silas turned 16 marked a turning point, a season where the undercurrent of discontent swelled into a visible tide. He'd always been a keen student, but his focus shifted from his schoolwork to an obsessive interest in the financial world. It started innocently enough, with his reading articles online, watching documentaries about tech titans and market moguls. Soon he was talking about investments, startups, and disruptive innovation with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. He'd dismiss my trade, my life's work as old-fashioned and limited, a quaint relic from a bygone era. His disdain for my craft became a daily presence. I'd come home, tired but content from a day spent shaping wood, only to be met with Silas's dismissive gaze. "Still playing with splinters, Dad?" He'd quip, his tone dripping with a superiority that stung more than any splinter ever could. He started spending even more time with Yorick, whose father, Mr. Thorne, had taken a keen interest in Silas's newfound entrepreneurial spirit. Mr. Thorne, a man whose ambition radiated from him like heat, seemed to validate Silas's every aspiration, subtly undermining my own parental influence. Willa tried to temper Silas's idealism, reminding him of the importance of grounding, of steady work, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears, overshadowed by the lure of quick fortunes and glittering promises. I tried to bridge the gap, to show him that even in traditional crafts there was innovation and artistry. I bought him books on modern woodworking techniques, offered to teach him how to integrate technology into design. He barely glanced at them. He wanted no part of my world. His dreams were of skyscrapers and stock exchanges, not the scent of pine and the honest grit of sawdust. The discussions grew heated, transforming into arguments that left me feeling hollowed out, as if a part of my soul was being systematically chipped away. He saw my concern as a lack of understanding, my advice as a tether holding him back. One evening, after a particularly intense debate about his future, Silas declared, his voice hard and uncompromising, "You just don't get it, Dad. You're stuck in the past. You'll never understand what it takes to really make it big." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and finality. Willa, usually the peacemaker, looked at me with an expression of profound sadness, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that was opening between father and son. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through my workshop, touching the smooth grain of a half-finished table, the rough texture of a newly planned beam. These were my life, my passion, but to Silas they were nothing but a symbol of my failure. The silence in our home, once comforting, now felt pregnant with unspoken resentments. Silas's ambition, once a source of pride, had morphed into a weapon aimed directly at the heart of our family. He had begun to view our love, our simple life, as a cage, and my efforts to connect as chains. He was reaching for something he perceived as greater, something shinier, and in doing so he was pushing away everything that had ever anchored him. I watched, helpless, as my son drifted further and further, seduced by the siren song of a different future, one that seemingly had no room for me or my humble legacy. The tension in our home reached a breaking point, one blustery autumn evening, a prelude to the storm that was brewing in our lives. Silas, now 18, burst through the door, his eyes blazing with a fierce, almost manic excitement. He clutched a sleek, expensive-looking tablet, its screen glowing with complex charts and figures. He'd just returned from a meeting with Mr. Thorne and a group of investors, as he called them, about a revolutionary app he and Jorik were developing. "It's genius, Dad. $1 million idea, easy," he exclaimed practically, bouncing with restless energy. He spoke of algorithms and market disruption, words that sounded alien and distant in our cozy, wood-scented living room. I tried to be supportive, genuinely. "That's wonderful, son. But have you thought about finishing your degree first? A solid foundation can help you," I began, my voice soft, cautious. He cut me off, a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. "A degree? That's for people who don't have vision, Dad. This is my chance. Mr. Thorne says it's now or never. He's willing to put up seed money, but it requires my full, undivided attention. No distractions." The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. No university, no following in your footsteps. Willa, sensing the impending clash, placed a gentle hand on my arm, a silent plea for calm. Then came the bombshell. "And to make this happen," Silas continued, his gaze unwavering, "I need capital. My share of the seed money. Mr. Thorne suggested I approach you. He said you've got assets. The workshop, Dad, it's prime real estate. If you could just mortgage it, or sell off some of the equipment just for a little while until we get this off the ground." His voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. He wanted me to risk everything, my livelihood, my legacy, the very foundation of our security, to fuel his unproven, audacious dream. My workshop wasn't just wood and tools. It was decades of sweat, passion, and the promise of a future for Willa and me. A promise of comfort in our later years. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My workshop, my sanctuary, the place where I found peace and purpose, was reduced to a mere financial instrument. "Silas, you can't be serious," I managed, my voice a strangled whisper. "That workshop is more than just property. It's everything I've built. It's how I provide for us. It's your inheritance for when the time comes." He scoffed, a bitter, grating sound. "Inheritance? What, a pile of sawdust and old tools?" "Dad, this is the 21st century. I don't want to be covered in wood chips my whole life. I want to build an empire, not furniture." His words were a dagger, twisting in an already gaping wound. The argument escalated into a furious exchange of accusations and recriminations. Willa, tears streaming down her face, tried to mediate, but the chasm was too wide now. the words too sharp. Silas, fueled by Mr. Thorne's promises and his own burgeoning ambition, saw my refusal as an act of deliberate sabotage, a final, desperate attempt to keep him small. "Fine," he roared, his face contorted with anger. "If you won't support me, I'll do it myself. I'll show you. I'll show all of you what I'm capable of without your outdated help." He stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Willa and me in the echoing silence, the scent of wood now tinged with the bitter aroma of broken dreams and a son's cold, calculating betrayal. I knew then with a chilling certainty that something fundamental had irrevocably shattered between us. Weeks bled into months after Silas's explosive departure. He moved in with Jorik, severing almost all contact, only occasionally sending curt messages to Willa, never to me. The silence was deafening, a constant phantom ache in my chest. Willa worried incessantly, her once bright eyes now shadowed with sorrow. We tried to reach out to mend the fractured bond, but Silas remained stubbornly aloof, convinced we were holding him back. Then one crisp autumn morning, a text message popped up on my phone. It was from Silas. My heart leaped, a flicker of hope igniting in the desolate landscape of my despair. The message was brief, almost transactional. "Dad, I need your help, emergency. Meet me at the old trailhead by Serpent's Ridge tomorrow at dawn. Come alone. It's urgent. No pleasantries, no explanation, just a summons." Serpent's Ridge was a remote, challenging trail deep in the Whispering Pines. A place we'd often hiked together when he was younger, a place of shared memories. Despite the lingering hurt, the words emergency and urgent pierced through my defenses. He was my son. My son was in trouble. All the bitterness, all the disappointment melted away in the face of a father's primal instinct to protect. I told Willa I was going fishing, a white lie to spare her the worry. I packed my old hiking gear, a first aid kit, and enough provisions for a challenging day's trek. The journey to the trailhead was long, winding through forgotten logging roads. With every mile, a faint tremor of unease started to mix with my hope. Why so cryptic? Why alone? My mind conjured various scenarios. A twisted ankle, a lost map, a sudden change of heart where he finally needed his old man. I pushed aside the darker thoughts, focusing on the image of Silas, perhaps chastened, reaching out for my guidance. The air at the trailhead was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of pine needles and damp earth. A thin mist clung to the forest floor, making the towering trees appear even more imposing. I waited and waited. An hour passed, then two. The rising sun, usually a comforting sight, felt indifferent, almost mocking. Doubt began to creep in, cold and insidious. Had he changed his mind? Was this some cruel trick? Just as despair threatened to consume me, a figure emerged from the dense undergrowth, not Silas, but Jorik. His usual swagger was replaced by a strange, nervous energy. "He's deeper in Alaric," Jorik said, his voice flat, avoiding my gaze. "He got into a bit of a scrape. Needs you to come quickly." He gestured vaguely into the darker depths of the forest, then turned and disappeared as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving me alone once more. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Something felt profoundly wrong. This wasn't Silas, this wasn't an emergency. This was a trap. But the image of my son, perhaps injured, perhaps truly in need, spurred me forward. I plunged into the unfamiliar trail, each step heavier than the last, an ominous sense of foreboding my only companion. Unaware that I was walking directly into the heart of my son's ultimate betrayal, the deeper I ventured into the Whispering Pines, the more twisted and unfamiliar the trail became. It wasn't the well-worn path Silas and I used to hike. This was rougher, less forgiving, as if deliberately chosen to disorient. The whispers of the wind through the pines took on an almost mocking tone, and the shadows seemed to stretch and contort into menacing shapes. My hope, which had propelled me forward, began to curdle into a cold dread. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made my heart lurch. Jorik's nervous demeanor, his hasty retreat, It all screamed danger, yet I pressed on, driven by that stubborn, unshakable fatherly devotion. After what felt like an eternity, scrambling over fallen logs and pushing through dense thickets, I stumbled into a small, secluded clearing. The silence here was different, heavier, oppressive. And there, standing by a massive ancient oak, was Silas. He wasn't injured. He wasn't in distress. He stood tall, his arms crossed, a chillingly calm expression on his face. Behind him, almost hidden by the shadows of the tree, was Yorick, a smug, almost triumphant smirk playing on his lips. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an emergency rescue. This was something else entirely. Silas, what is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the roar I'd let out just hours ago. The anger, the fear, the betrayal from that morning's note, all flooded back, overwhelming me. Silas simply stared, his eyes, once so full of warmth and admiration, now utterly devoid of emotion like polished stones. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his gaze fixed on mine, unwavering. "It's time, Dad," he said, his voice eerily flat, devoid of any filial affection. "Time for you to understand what real ambition looks like, what it takes to succeed in a world you clearly don't comprehend." My confusion morphed into a burning indignation. Understand what? Treachery, deception. What have I ever done to deserve this, son? My plea hung in the cold air unanswered. Silas just shook his head, a pitying look on his face. "You stood in my way, Dad. You tried to tie me to your outdated world. You refused to see my potential. Mr. Thorne, he understands. He sees the future. He sees me." He gestured vaguely towards Yorick, who nodded, a silent accomplice in this cruel charade. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Mr. Thorne had poisoned his mind, fed his ambition, twisted his love into this bitter, unforgiving resentment. Then Silas reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn, familiar hiking map. Not the pristine new maps we'd bought for this trip, but our old meticulously marked map of Serpent's Ridge, filled with my own annotations. He pointed a finger not to our intended route, but to a dark, ominous section marked with a skull and crossbones, an old local legend, a cautionary tale of a rogue grizzly bear that roamed that particular stretch of wilderness, a tale I had told him as a child to emphasize caution and respect for nature. He smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "This is your path now, Dad. Face Grizzly Beast," he repeated, the words from the note echoing in the silent clearing, a final, chilling decree. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of his words. Face Grizzly Beast. The old story, a tale meant to instill caution, is now weaponized against me. I stared at Silas, searching for any flicker of the sun I knew, any sign of remorse or hesitation. There was none, only a chilling resolve. "This isn't a game, Silas. This is real." "There's a reason that area is marked off," I pleaded, my voice laced with desperation. Yorick, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, his eyes alight with a predatory gleam. "Oh, it's very real, Alaric, and it's all part of the plan." "The plan?" I echoed, my throat tight. Silas looked at Yorick, a silent exchange passing between them, a shared understanding that excluded me entirely. "My app," Silas explained, his voice gaining a disturbing edge of excitement. "It's not just an investment tool, it's a wilderness survival game, Dad. But not just any game, a live-streamed survival challenge. The ultimate reality show. And you, Dad, are the inaugural contestant." He gestured to a small, almost invisible camera strapped to Yorick's chest, and another, cleverly hidden in the dense foliage. My stomach lurched. They were filming this. My humiliation, my potential death was entertainment. Yorick then revealed a satellite phone. "We'll be broadcasting this to our investors, to potential subscribers to the world." A man abandoned by his son, forced to confront the wilderness. The ultimate test of survival. He chuckled, a dry, heartless sound. "And if you manage to face the grizzly beast, as Silas so eloquently put it, well, that's just even more compelling content, isn't it?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My son wasn't just abandoning me. He was exploiting my potential death for profit and fame. He was sacrificing me on the altar of his ruthless ambition, eager to watch me struggle, to see me break, all for the sake of his revolutionary app. And what about Willa? I choked out, the thought of her heartbroken, distraught face twisting my gut. What will you tell her? Silas's face hardened, a mask of indifference. We'll say you wandered off, got lost. It happens in these woods, Dad. A tragic accident. No one will suspect a thing. And by then my app will be a runaway success. The money will be rolling in. She'll be taken care of. He said it with such cold calculation, as if my wife's grief was a mere inconvenience, an unfortunate side effect to be managed. The son I knew, the kind, compassionate boy, was truly gone, replaced by this ruthless, self-serving stranger. Silas took another step towards me, his eyes piercing. This isn't just about the money, Dad. This is about proving myself. Proving that I can achieve greatness without your limitations, without your outdated ideas. This is my chance to step out of your shadow once and for all. He looked at me, not with hatred, but with a chilling detachment, as if I were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. As Yorick began to set up more cameras, Silas, with a final dismissive wave, turned and walked away, disappearing into the dense forest with Yorick close behind, leaving me utterly alone in the clearing, the ominous silence punctuated only by the whirring of the hidden cameras. Broadcasting my despair to an unseen audience, the clearing slowly emptied, leaving me a solitary figure beneath the towering pines. The realization that I was now the unwitting star of Silas's perverse reality show settled over me like a shroud. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call felt amplified, imbued with a sinister intent. My mind, usually a fortress of calm, was a tempest of conflicting emotions. Profound betrayal, burning anger, and a chilling fear that gripped my very core. They wanted me to face a grisly beast, an old legend, a terrifying reality. And they wanted to watch. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the bitter taste of my son's treachery coating my tongue. How could he? How could the boy I raised, the child I loved unconditionally, orchestrate such a cruel, calculating fate? The question echoed in the vast emptiness of the forest, unanswered, mocking. My gaze fell upon the meager supplies I had brought, meant for a day hike, not a struggle for survival against both nature and a literal beast. The irony was a bitter pill. Silas had stripped me of everything, even the basic human dignity of a father's love, all for a fleeting moment of perceived glory. Yet, amidst the crushing despair, a flicker of something else began to stir within me. It was small at first, a tiny ember in the ashes of my broken heart, but it grew with each ragged breath. It was the memory of Willa's worried eyes, the unspoken fear she carried. It was the realization that I couldn't just give up, couldn't just lie down and let Silas win, let his monstrous ambition triumph. I had to survive. Not for him, not for their cameras, but for Willa and for myself. To reclaim my dignity, to prove that I was more than just a discarded pawn in his twisted game. I began to move, slowly at first, then with a growing purpose. My eyes, once clouded with grief, sharpened, scanning the dense woods. I was a woodsman, a survivor. I had taught Silas how to read the forest, how to respect its power. Now those lessons, honed over decades, would be my salvation. I examined my surroundings, noting the direction of the sun, the flow of a small stream I could hear nearby. My carpentry skills, once dismissed as outdated, would now become my tools for survival. I would build a shelter, find food, and fight for every single breath. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I found a small, sheltered alcove beneath an overhang of rock. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I began to gather fallen branches, moss, and leaves, working with a frantic energy, fueled by a renewed sense of defiance. The chill of the evening air reminded me of the lurking dangers, both seen and unseen. But now fear was no longer paralyzing. It was a motivator. They wanted a show? Fine, I would give them a show. Not the spectacle of my defeat, but the epic saga of my survival. And as the last sliver of sunlight vanished, plunging the forest into darkness, a primal roar echoed in the distance, a sound that confirmed my worst fears and steeled my resolve. The grizzly beast was real. The guttural roar, closer now, vibrated through the very ground, a raw primal sound that slammed into my chest. It wasn't the distant, echoing growl from last night. This was a hungry, territorial bellow, unmistakably close. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the backdrop of the menacing forest. I scrambled deeper into the thicket, my shelter a flimsy shield against such power. The air grew heavy, charged with a scent I knew instinctively, the musky, pungent odor of a large predator. This wasn't a game. This was a fight for life, broadcast for Silas's callous amusement. My instincts, honed over decades of living close to nature, screamed at me, "Don't run, stand your ground." But the sheer size and ferocity of a grizzly made those rules feel abstract, almost suicidal. My mind raced, pulling from every lesson, every cautionary tale I'd ever heard. The rustling grew louder, closer. I could hear the snapping of branches, the heavy thud of paws on the forest floor. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but the image of Willa, her face etched with worry, flashed through my mind. I couldn't die here, not like this, not as a spectacle for a son who had lost his way. Then, through a narrow gap in the trees, I saw it. Massive, shaggy, its dark eyes fixed on my position, the legendary grizzly of Serpent's Ridge, a beast of immense power and terrifying speed. It let out another roar, a spine-chilling sound that tore through the quiet morning. My legs, despite their age and aches, found a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength. I turned and ran, not blindly but strategically, weaving through the densest parts of the undergrowth, hoping to slow its pursuit, to use the terrain to my advantage. Every tree, every rock became a potential shield, a reprieve. The chase was a blur of frantic movement and primal fear. I could hear the beast crashing through the forest behind me, its heavy breaths almost visible in the cold air. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed in protest, but I pushed harder, fueled by a desperate will to survive. I thought of the cameras hidden somewhere, capturing my terror, my struggle. The thought of Silas watching, deriving satisfaction from my predicament, ignited a furious, empowering rage. I wouldn't just survive. I would make them regret this. I would show them the true strength of a father scorned. I spotted a narrow, rocky crevice ahead, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. It was a gamble, a desperate chance. With a final agonizing burst of speed, I launched myself into the opening, scraping my skin, tearing my clothes, but making it through. The grizzly, too large to follow, let out a frustrated bellow, its massive paw swatting uselessly at the rock face. I lay there, gasping for air, my body trembling but alive. My escape was temporary, I knew, but it was a victory. A small defiant act against the cruel fate my son had orchestrated. The beast was still out there, its presence a constant chilling reminder. But for now I had outsmarted death, and a new fierce determination solidified within me. Silas would pay for this. Days blurred into a grueling cycle of survival. I hunted small game, foraged for edible plants, and built a more substantial camouflaged shelter. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of determination, each sunset a deepening resolve for retribution. The grizzly, though still a menacing presence, no longer consumed my every thought. My focus had shifted. Silas had thrown me into the wilderness to die, but he had also inadvertently given me time to think, to plan. My mind, once consumed by paternal grief, was now a cold, efficient instrument of revenge. I knew the layout of the Whispering Pines better than Silas ever would. I knew the old logging roads, the abandoned cabins, the hidden trails. My years of carpentry and working with natural materials had taught me patience, precision, and the art of subtle manipulation. They wanted a show? I would give them a show they would never forget. A twist in their narrative, a shocking revelation that would turn their carefully constructed spectacle into a monument to their own deceit. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing. My first task was to find the hidden cameras. I moved like a phantom, silent and observant, using my knowledge of the terrain to spot the telltale glint of a lens, the subtle shift in foliage. It took me 3 agonizing days, but one by one I found them, cleverly disguised but not invisible to a woodsman's keen eye. I didn't destroy them. Instead, I carefully repositioned them, adjusting their angles, sometimes turning them inward, sometimes towards a path that led nowhere, creating visual chaos, editing their reality show from the heart of the wilderness. I wanted to confuse them, to make them wonder. I also began to leave subtle signs, almost imperceptible to an untrained eye, but glaringly obvious to me. Scratches on trees, carefully placed stones, broken twigs, a hunter's code, a series of breadcrumbs leading not to my location, but to an illusion, a cleverly constructed path designed to mislead. I wanted them to follow, to believe they were still in control, still observing my slow demise. But I was no longer the prey. I was the silent hunter, turning their game on its head. My final preparations involved constructing a decoy, a crude effigy of myself, draped in my discarded, tattered shirt, positioned precariously at the edge of a deep ravine known for its unstable ground. I wanted them to think they had found my resting place, to believe their grim predictions had come true. As I finished my work surveying the scene, a grim satisfaction settled over me. Silas and Yorick thought they were the puppeteers, pulling the strings of my fate. But I was about to cut those strings, to reveal the true architects of this cruel charade, and turn the wilderness into their judge and jury. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. The air crackled with an almost tangible tension. I had laid my trap, a meticulously crafted illusion, and now all that was left was to wait for Silas and Yorick to walk into it. My plan was simple, yet devastatingly effective. Use their own hunger for compelling content against them. I had watched them a safe distance away for days. They were growing restless, anxious for a decisive end to their show. They clearly believed I was either dead or on the brink, and their arrogance was their undoing. I had anticipated their next move. After finding the repositioned cameras and my cryptic trail, their curiosity, mixed with frustration, would lead them to actively search for me. The decoy, strategically placed, would be too tempting a lead to ignore. I watched as their figures, small against the vastness of the forest, approached the ravine. Silas, always impetuous, was in the lead. Yorick, ever the cameraman, close behind, his camera still diligently recording. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a fierce, burning anticipation. "Look, Yorick, there, I told you he'd be here." Silas's triumphant voice, thin and reedy, carried on the wind. I saw him point, his excitement palpable. They moved faster now, their caution replaced by a desperate urge for conclusion. They wanted their final dramatic shot. As they reached the edge of the ravine, Silas practically sprinted towards the effigy, eager to confirm my demise. Yorick, too focused on capturing the moment, barely looked at his feet. They were so close, then I struck. It wasn't a physical blow, but a strategic reveal. From my hidden vantage point, I triggered a small, almost undetectable mechanism. A barely audible click, and a series of previously repositioned cameras aimed directly at them flickered to life. The main feed, the one broadcasting live to their investors, suddenly shifted from the static, dead image of my decoy to a live, undeniable shot of Silas and Yorick, standing over my supposed corpse, clearly gloating. Their faces a tableau of callous triumph. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Silas, leaning over the effigy, let out a whoop of triumph, oblivious. But Yorick, glancing at his monitor, saw it. His face drained of all color. "Silas, look!" he shrieked, his voice filled with a sudden, dawning horror. Silas turned, just as my figure emerged from the dense foliage behind them. Not dead, not defeated, but alive and utterly, terrifyingly resolute. My voice, strong and clear, cut through the stunned silence. Surprise, boys. The show's not over. It's just beginning. The camera in Jorek's hand, still broadcasting, captured Silas's face as it contorted. Fear, shock, and dawning realization warring for dominance. Silas's face was a mask of utter horror, not just at seeing me alive, but at the chilling implication of what I had done. Jorek, his face ashen, fumbled with the satellite phone, desperate to cut the live feed. But it was too late. Their smug celebration over my death had been broadcast live to every single investor, every potential subscriber, painting a stark, undeniable picture of their depravity. The silence that followed my words was heavy, thick with their dawning realization of complete and utter ruin. You set us up, Silas stammered, his bravado utterly evaporated. His eyes darted nervously between me and the ravine, then to Jorek, whose own face was etched with pure panic. You think this is over? I asked, my voice low and steady, devoid of the anger that had once consumed me. It's only just begun, Silas. The world has just seen the true nature of your ambition, the lengths you would go to step on others, to exploit even your own father. The weight of my words seemed to crush him, forcing him to shrink inward, his shoulders slumping. Jorek, ever the pragmatist, saw the bigger picture. Mr. Thorne will drop us. Our funding, everything is gone, he cried, pointing accusingly at Silas. This was your idea, Silas. You said it would work. The accusations, the finger-pointing, began to fly between them. A desperate scramble to shift blame, to salvage what little they could from the wreckage of their scheme. Their partnership, built on avarice and manipulation, was crumbling before my eyes, broadcast live for the world to witness. I stepped forward, no longer the victim, but the judge. You wanted to build an empire, Silas? I asked, a hint of sorrow mingling with my resolve. You wanted to show me what real ambition looked like? This is it. The ruin of your reputation, the destruction of your future, all for a fleeting moment of perceived glory. I pulled out a small waterproof pouch I'd salvaged. From it I produced the original note, the one that said, "Face Grizzly Beast." I held it up, not just for them, but for the unseen audience. This is your legacy, Silas. This is what you built. As the sun, once a harbinger of betrayal, now shone down on the clearing, I watched as the harsh reality of their actions sank in. Jorek was frantically trying to make calls, his face contorted in frustrated desperation. Silas, however, simply stood there, staring at the ground, utterly defeated. His grand vision, his ruthless ambition, had led him to this precipice. He had sacrificed his integrity, his family, and ultimately his future, all for a hollow dream. The silence returned, this time filled not with fear, but with the quiet, chilling aftermath of justice served. I turned, leaving them in their self-made prison of ruin. The cameras still recording their unraveling, my dignity and spirit reclaimed. I was alive. I had survived. And I had shown my son and the world that some things are more valuable than ambition and fame. My long journey home to Willa, where true healing could begin, awaited. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of family betrayal.